Hey, welcome to Genre Chat. I'm Caleb Walton, and tonight our guest is Bill Myers. Hey, Bill, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I am doing wonderful. I'm doing good. It's freezing on this side. I know you're over on the West Coast, and it's probably a lot warmer climate than it is here right now.
Yeah, we're about 85 degrees today.
Oh wow, we've been in the 50s all week, so that would be good. All the hurricanes and everything that came through kind of pushed all the warm air out. Tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about supernatural suspense novels. I know that's one of your favorite to write. You do some writing for that. And I also wanted to touch on the different writing you do for children and the different things you're involved with. But first, tell us a little bit about the type of things you write and the different things that you're working on.
Well, um, hmm, you're right. I write a lot for adults, supernatural suspense, a little bit of sci-fi peppered in that. I
Mm-hmm.
also write a lot for children. I think I've written about 80 kids books and another maybe 40 for adults. And then to make matters even more complicated, we have a film company because I started off as a movie writer.
Mm-hmm.
So we're writing scripts and trying to get those produced. Sometimes they're based on my book, sometimes they're original material. So we have a lot of balls in the air, which is good. I have a mild case of ADD, so it's nice to keep active.
Shake everything up. That's my problem when I'm reading books. I want to read like three different genres at one time, and then I can't. And then it all gets kind of mixed in there together. I'm
Yeah,
actually reading one of your books now. I'm starting the Harbingers series a couple of weeks ago, and I'm loving that. So,
good, good.
but talk a little bit about the supernatural suspense books that you've worked on. What inspired you to get into that sort of subgenre?
I got a call quite a few years ago from Tyndale House Publishers.
Mm-hmm.
I just done a children's series called McGee and Me, a video series, and they wanted to do. At that time, there was a lot of horror
Mm-hmm.
for teens, so they called me up and they said, "Would you like to write a Christian horror series?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I'm kind of busy with my Christian pornography series right now," and they got what I was saying. And they said, but there's a real hunger out there for teens and adults. I said, well, okay, you let me. I'll be happy to write about the supernatural, but I'm not going to write horror because there's two sides of the supernatural. I don't get why we always think we have to deal with the devil and the demons and all the gore. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it, but there's this whole other side to the supernatural. So I try to explore both of those. Did a ton of research for this series. There's 12 books in the series. Actually, one of C.S. Lewis on it a little while back.
Wow.
And so everything from UFOs to Ouija boards to possession to all of these things. I became sort of a reluctant supernatural know-it-all. So I
Mm-hmm.
have all this stuff in my head. So I figured, why not write something that'll keep me engaged?
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I got into writing was I was always bored with what I was reading. So I figured if I can keep myself engaged, hopefully I've got the audience.
I like that. I like that. I love to look at that perspective of, write for yourself first. It doesn't always work, I guess, if you're trying to break into the market for the first time, but write for yourself first. And then if it works for you, hopefully it'll work for someone else. And you've got that part of yourself in the story itself. I bet that took a lot of things with the research. I know you said you did a little bit of sci-fi and stuff like that. How did you research those kind of wild foreign topics?
To me, that's the best part.
Mm-hmm.
Research is actually, for me, the best part of writing. I've had people always want to talk about themselves. I've interviewed everybody from the head of the CIA Psychic Research Division to the son of Sam serial killer, uh, to people that claim they've been abducted by UFOs, and just on down the list, as well as the other side. I've talked to a lot of people that have prophetic gifts.
Mm-hmm.
I have one who's become a friend now who does miracles on a regular basis. So there's that whole world out there that we kind of ignore
Mm-hmm.
because we think it's too uh, fantasy. It's not fantasy at all. So yeah, I love doing the research. I love sitting down with somebody who says they're a Satanist and just
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before. I love sitting down and talking with a Satanist. But you're right. It's just unlimited of different perspectives on things.
sure, and to find out why they want to hang out with somebody that wants to take when they could go to the other side and be with somebody that wants, with God who wants to give and love. So just fascinating. So yeah, for me, the best thing is research. The hardest part about writing is writing, but that, I guess, comes with the territory of trying to feed your family and pay the mortgage.
Exactly. What does your writing process look like? I mean, do you I know some people that'll sit down and just write. I think I have a friend who claims he told me once that he writes tries to write 2,000 words a day. And I was going, no, that really makes me feel terrible about myself. And, so people put a couple of hundred words here and there. What's your writing process look like?
Oh, I'm really, really disciplined. I can think of dozens of writers more skilled than I am, but they don't have the discipline to finish it. I write 2,000 words a day. I write in 3 2-hour sessions. Now remember, this is full time. Most people don't have that, but you still can carve out the time and say, I'm going to write this amount of time every day. And somehow it turns into a book. In my case, I write 3 hours in the morning, which is basically rewriting what I wrote the day before that I thought was genius, but I look at it and go, this is awful. And it's a good way of sneaking up to writing. So I rewrite what I wrote the day before. I take a break. Then I write 2 hours of fresh material. And then, as I'm getting tired, I rewrite what I rewrote the day before that I thought that I finally fixed, but I didn't. So I'm leapfrogging. But I will not go back and rewrite something 3 times, because you can always make a sentence better. And generally, I do that to get the first draft, and then I'll go through and reread it and smooth it out and reread it again. But it's very methodical. It's if I can work within a structure, believe it or not, that structure gives me freedom for my imagination. You and I were talking earlier. Do I outline? You bet. I know every scene before I start to write. It takes me a month to outline a book. But I do that so I don't go down some weird rabbit trail and 6 weeks later go, wait a minute, this doesn't work. I do all that as I run the scenes through my head during that month before I start the actual book. So it's a craft. It's not some inspirational art. The inspiration happens within the confines, for me, within the confines of a pretty rigid structure.
I like that, and that helps bring it not so much of a hobby or something that you do on the side to you. That is your profession. You are a professional writer if you do it even when you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, I wish I was a full-time writer like you," and my response is usually, "I don't think you do." For me, it's a job. Every day I wake up and I don't go to the factory, but I go into this office and I write. The joys of people that write part-time is you write from the joy. You're usually operating that drill press for 8 hours, can hardly wait to get home and put in those 2 hours writing, or 2 hours in the morning before you go to work. Carve out the time. It's amazing. If I don't carve out the time, it always gets stolen from me. So if you're working on another job, if you're teaching, get up 2 hours early. Write. Go do the work. Go to bed early and do it again. And it turns into a book eventually.
I like that. I have a hard time keeping my mind from stop working when I'm doing something. I'm at work. When I get home at night, I have 20 emails that I've sent myself. Oh, put this in this scene. I said, if anybody ever reads my emails, they're going to think I'm crazy, because I do a little bit of the sci-fi speculative stuff, and the murderer comes from another dimension will be the subject line. And people are going to look at that one day and think I was insane, but that's how you think.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm looking at the picture here. If you can see all those red notebooks that I have on my shelf there, those are all ideas that I've accumulated over the years
Wow.
and hope to turn into books. So
Wow.
we're at
How
least,
many of that? I can see a little bit of it. How many of those books do you have?
I don't know, a couple dozen maybe. But, you know, I've been doing this for about 40 years, so it's I don't know how that happened. Again, what's a children's riddle? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Hmm.
You just do a little. You do what you can do, and somehow it grows.
I like that. I like that a lot. And then when I guess when you're finished with the project and wondering what to start next, you just go back and flip through and find an idea that works for you. I've
Yeah,
really.
yeah, and sometimes ideas that you've completely forgotten.
Mhm.
One of the things I'm careful about, and when readers ask me if I would read, or new writers ask me if I'd read something, if the genre is close to my genre, I have to reluctantly decline because I'm afraid that idea will get in the back of my head, and 5 years later it'll pop up, and I think I'm a genius, and I'm inadvertently stealing from somebody. So, yeah.
I like that. So after all that research and looking into all these different types of people and different types of cultures, how do you choose what to kind of weed out and base your story off of, and how does that kind of grow into that outline?
Um, well, that's a great question. I think I always start with a premise,
Hmm.
a concept that hopefully hasn't been done before. And I'll say, so now I'll give you an example. The screenplay that we're trying to sell to Hollywood right now is I interviewed this head of um, UCLA physics department who deals with higher dimensions. And then I brought him into the same room with this person that has some prophetic gifts, this Christian person. I put them together. I said, what do you two have in common? And they, believe it or not, have a lot in common. He uses different language than he uses, but they're both talking about a higher dimension. So I took all that information and just said, well, now, how could I turn that into a story? And you just work it until you have a premise. And in this premise, she's trying to contact somebody that has died. And then you just build. I do something called plot webbing, which is really important for me. I'll put a circle and write the basic thing. Okay, dead friend, and then I put spokes out and say all the crazy things that could happen with that, and then I do another spoke and do all the crazy things, and I fill up the whole page. Most of them are bad ideas, but it's like going. But every time I have one, and my brain says it's a bad idea, I say, "Shut up! I know. I'm just plot webbing." And before you know it, you have pages of these bad ideas, but every once in a while there's a good one. It's kind of like going to a buffet. You don't have to eat everything on the buffet, right? And so I look at all those ideas and start to think. The next step is I try to find characters that are engaging, that are original. And then the next step is, what can I give that character a want that they just drives them? Actually, that's before we invent the character. But what just drives this person that this person needs to have? And as soon as I've got that, then the rest is just hanging a story on how the person gets it or doesn't get it.
I like that. I'm gonna have to try that. You said it was called plot webbing?
Well, that's what I call it.
I
Yeah.
like it. No, I like it because it is like a spider web. It just works its way out, and it's a way to kind of get all the ideas onto the paper. If not, it's like you're like me, and they just drive you crazy all the time.
So they're on paper, and then the ones that you can't use, but they're good, but they don't work in that desire, that character's desire, you put them in red notebooks and wait for the next time around.
And then you might go back and find out they weren't as bad as you thought they were to start with.
That's right.
I love that. I love that. I wanted to ask, do you base your characters off of people that you know? I mean, how do you frame and grow the character? Is it just the best person to be in that position, or what? How do you go about doing that?
Um, I ask my characters different questions. Where do they work? What are their desires? What is their crippledness? What are they bad at? And then the most powerful question, I learned this from a movie director, is I ask my characters, what are you afraid of? And they start to become vulnerable and they start to become three-dimensional if I spend enough time with them. If an idea comes too fast, I usually don't trust it because I figure, well, I've seen that or it's a cliche. But I'll spend, again, a good week developing just the major characters, 3 or 4 characters, and running them in my head and thinking, okay, strengths, weaknesses, wants, and fears. And they start to materialize. And people, oftentimes, readers will. My very first novel is called Blood of Heaven. And it's basically, they find a couple drops of blood. They think it might be Christ's. They're not sure. But whoever it was didn't have a human father. They replicate the DNA and they put it in a serial killer to see what he'll do. Well, his personality starts to change, but because it's science and not faith, it changes back. And he starts to become the monster again. And eventually he dies in the story. He lays down his life to save somebody. And I get emails all the time from people that are so mad at me because, particularly women who have fallen in love with this character just because he's vulnerable and has all these other qualities. So you try to create characters that people either love, relate to, or hate. And once you got that, once you give the character a want, once you have a high concept, and once you've got characters that are engaging, the writing pretty much takes care of itself.
And then they're real to you. You catch yourself thinking about them, and then you have to remind, oh wait, this is a fictional character.
Yeah, someday I want to write a story about all the characters that I've written who come back to life that I've forgotten about.
Oh, that would be a wonderful story.
I don't remember. You don't remember? You killed me in the 3rd chapter. I'm sorry. Because I've written 120 books. So, they start to blur after a while.
That is awesome. Can you sit down? I mean, I actually spoke to another a writer friend of mine, and she said, I've never read anything that I've written after it's published and on the shelf. She said, because if I pick it up and start flipping through it, I'll find millions of things that I want to change and it'll drive me crazy. And then I actually have another writer friend that says she sits down and will read her own books to get more familiar with her writing style. And which one are you? Do you like to read what you've written, or is it just like?
Oh, no. I've rewritten, by the time it goes to editors and proofreaders, I've rewritten every book before it's published about 7 times. And that's pretty normal.
Did you say 7 or 70?
No, 7. After 7 times, I'm sick of it. I don't want anything to do with it. So there's no reason on earth when the publisher sends me the copies that I would want to sit down and read it again. I've already done it, thank you. So I just put it on the shelf behind me here and kind of ignore it until the royalty checks come in. Then I'm very grateful.
Then you really like it. Then you're not tired of it anymore.
My favorite book, yes.
I like that. Well, what's different? I know we touched on this a minute ago, but what's the biggest challenges from when you switch from one thing to another? Because I know you do the novels for the adults, and you do the stuff for the films and the scripts for that, and then you do the kids writing. What's the biggest challenge for you when you're switching from one to the other, or does it kind of help keep your imagination fresh?
It does. It keeps me on my toes. It stops me from being stale. I love writing children's books. Most of my children's books are comedies,
Mm-hmm.
and they just loosen my self-importance. It just and makes me a kid again. So I'm goofy and have fun writing those. And then when I'm tired of being goofy, I get back into something serious like the books. Screenplays are difficult because the people that pay you for screenplays don't always know a good story. So
Hmm.
a lot of times you're busy trying to keep them happy, and you're writing stuff that is just not so good because they're paying you to do it. Screenplays, you reach more people with a script, but artistically, it's not nearly as rewarding as it is writing a book.
And I know you said you've actually adapted some of your own writing, if I remember correctly, into the screenplays. I bet that was interesting, changing it from one medium to another, because it's totally different rules of how those types of craft work.
It is, but I tell you, writing screenplays has made me a better novelist.
Really?
Yeah. Frank Preddy, who's also a supernatural type writer,
Mm-hmm.
Frank and I both came out of a screenwriting background. And one of the first things they teach you in writing is to show something and don't tell the audience about it, but show it in action. Well, you have to do that in a screenplay because that's all there is. You can't have somebody spend 60 seconds describing the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show these things. So both Frank and I come from a background where we actually have a leg up on some of our novelist friends because we understand how to show something instead of just telling the audience about it.
Mm-hmm. And we all try. We all hear that all the show don't tell, but that almost forces you to show not tell. There's no other option.
No other option, yeah. So screenwriting is probably the least rewarding for an artist, but for somebody that wants to reach a lot of people, it's certainly a lot more people watch a movie than read a book.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I know in the Harbingers books, you and Frank Preddy both worked on those. Was that a big challenge going from writing a full length novels to the short stories, and then you're switching off the characters with the authors, which keeps it so much fun when you're reading it. Was that fun writing it too, or was it kind of stressful?
No, it was fun. There was actually 4 of us. Each one of us writes a section of the big book.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 novellas that make up that book. And it's the same characters going from plot to plot to plot. And it was actually kind of fun because, yes, you had to say everything a lot faster. I think each story was probably 20,000 words, maybe. And then the fun thing was, since all 4 of us have been writing for years, we could play with each other, and I could hand over to Frank a story, and Frank would go, "What have you done?" And I could go, "Yeah, good luck with that one, baby." So there was a certain joy, particularly if you're passive aggressive, a certain joy in seeing your friends go, "What have you moron?" But you know it's going to come back to you because we've done 20 of those books.
Exactly, and then it goes, and then it comes back, and you've got to pick up and deal with what Alton Gansky left for you, what the mess he left for you to clean up.
But it's been really, really good because, again, if you've done the same thing over and over and over again, even if it's writing books, there's that boredom factor.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get something from one of the writers, when it's my turn to come back on again, it's like, whoa, and then trying to put the pieces together. So it was as much fun experience as I hope it is a reading experience.
It is. I'm really enjoying it. I'm about halfway through the first book, and I'm loving. One of the coolest things is it's like all 4 of the characters are so different and so unique. I would never have thought to put that group of people together in one story, but that keeps it so, it keeps the emotions and everything so fresh, because normally you wouldn't put the tattoo artist and the high school jock and this person all together in one story.
And that's the perfect example of what we're talking about. I originated the series, so I created those characters, and then we assigned whoever wanted to write for them. But I spent a good week thinking, just what you said, what would be unexpected, and what type of chemistry could explode between these people. So it's good. I'm glad it's working for you.
It is. It is. It is. It's really good. It's really good. Well, we only have a few minutes left. I've really enjoyed talking to you and just, learning more about the craft and the different genres. Before we go, if you had one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring writer, maybe somebody that's just starting out in the industry, what would that advice be?
To write every day, to set aside that time, to write good or bad. It's like going to the Olympics. Nobody drifts into the Olympics. They work out every day, and every day you should be writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be published, but you just develop those chops. To this day, hopefully every book I write's better than the last one because I'm still learning. But you can't learn by reading it in a book. You can at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to make the mistakes to see what works and what doesn't. So yeah, that would be the number one rule, is to write. If you can only write half an hour a day, you carve out that time and you write. And you tell your children and your wife you love them very much, but go away.
Whatever it takes to get focused and to get that in.
Yeah.
What do you like to read for fun? Or I'm sure you do. What do you like to read for fun? I've heard different people say that when you write and you self-edited, you can't read for fun because then it ruins the reading someone else's stuff.
Yeah, and there's a lot of truth to that. I like reading a couple things. I like reading poetry.
Really?
Some of the great Christian poets, not necessarily the superficial guys or guyettes, but the Christian poets that are really talking about deep things. And then I also like reading about the mystics 500, 400, 200 years ago that were writing about experiencing God. Because it's one thing to read about God. It's quite another to experience Him.
That's right.
I like reading those, and I like I said, poetry, because an 80-word novel, you can make mistakes there.
Mm-hmm.
When you're writing a 20-line poem, every word has to be there for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I like reading that. Oh, I found a writer that I think is brilliant called James Lee Burke. He's a popular author. People don't like him because he's so literary. The literary people are kind of snobs, and they go, "Oh, no, he's a detective guy," but he's really good. So I try to find and then I read real slowly to see and study what they're doing. So do I read for fun? Not often, but for me, studying is fun. So that's what I do.
Do you like to read in the genre that you're writing in? Does that, I like to do that for myself, like just to kind of get in the right frame of mind for the language and the different stuff like that.
Not necessarily, because I start to develop the voice of who I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
It interferes with my own voice. So not so much the case with poetry and with the old church fathers, but yeah, I stay away from what I'm writing, actually, when I'm writing it, yeah.
I like that. Well, if anybody wants to learn more about what you've written or maybe get in contact with you, do you have like a website or something somebody can go to?
Yeah, it's billmyers.com. And that's MYERS, billmyers.com. And
Awesome.
I'm on Facebook too, I think. Bill Myers, author, filmmaker, something like that, because there's a lot of Bill Myers out there. But yeah, those two things, Facebook or my website, and I try to answer all my email. I think we mentioned earlier that I'm not very good at reading other people's work because I don't want to accidentally steal from them 5 or 10 years down the line. I think that it was my idea when it was really theirs. So I'm not real good at reading new people's work, though I'm a big fan of encouraging people to write. But I try to answer all my emails.
Well, then you can go back and look in the red books and see was that my idea. You can go back and flip them and see if it was in there.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's a good index. Well, I am so glad you came on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you. I can't wait to finish your book and read the others in there as well. But thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week.